Hello and welcome to Seeing Jesus with Paul Miller. I'm Liz Vobril, and I'm here today with Paul and Adam Barker, director of our A Praying Life ministry. And we often say on this podcast, See Jesus works on the imagination and the heart. So today we want to work on imagination for leading prayer meetings, just kind of mining the minds of these two guys, both of whom have led many prayer meetings, and I'll chime in too. I've led a few myself, and trying to share collective wisdom on how do we do this? How do we do this well, making room for the Spirit and having people, Lord willing, leaving more encouraged than they came in. So Paul, why don't you kick us off?
We thought it'd be fun to begin just reminiscing on my dad and how he led prayer meetings. And I watched him learn how to lead prayer meetings as a young man, because he, all his training, if you're a pastor, is in talking. So like how to talk. So the content of your talking is learning, Greek and Hebrew, and then there's how to talk. But there's nothing that pastors get in. There's no courses that I know of any Reformed seminaries on how to pray. And I haven't even tried on that. So when Dad went to a prayer meeting, he did what he did on Sunday morning, which was he talked. And he couldn't figure out why the prayer meeting was so boring until he went to L'Abri, as I mentioned in the Praying Church book, and saw a real prayer meeting in a real community led by Francis Schaeffer, where Francis Schaeffer didn't talk and people pray. So I watched my dad over the years pray. I mean, there were so many little things he did but it was really kind of, it was sort of about two things, or maybe two aspects of the kingdom. It was the people there and what was on their heart. That was really important. I think that makes it fun. And the other one is drawing them into the larger work of God. And if you have too much on either side of that, it gets unbalanced. Like if it's too much on the issues that people have, then you get ingrown. If it's too much on the kingdom, then you're neglecting the people. And Dad would do that. I have a chapter on this in a Praying Church book by Praying Big. He would even have he might say one or two sentences on just pray, let's think outside of our world. Let's take this medical need, and let's pray for India or something like that, so you didn't get stuck. But so much of good leadership of the praying is just letting people come alive with their own hearts. Adam, and Liz, what are your thoughts? That's just kind of off the top of my head on
thinking about just specific prayer meetings on that. And that's actually really clear. That's really helpful. I don't know that I've read, of course, the book and taught that, but how succinct that is of the balance between those two things. And, I think the biggest wrestle is people tend to go to the Aunt Edna's hip, piece. And that's not even, I don't even know that all the time categorizes in that first piece of really what's happening in their life. It is, and we don't want to miss the reality of Aunt Edna's hip, but I don't know, we miss what's really going on, their anxiety with it, or how that's affecting them or affecting their kids, or
Right. For those who haven't followed in other conversations we've had about prayer, Aunt Edna, bless her soul, whoever she is, actually that's sort of a shorthand. Aunt Edna's hip in our conversations functions like a shorthand for sometimes like the regularly offered prayer request, or perhaps in a group of old faithful saints, the tendency to circle around health issues as the main context for prayer needs in the group, which are all, you would say, guys, right? Like we should be praying for those things, but sometimes that creates a a framework like we're coming to the health prayer store where you
Right.
should pray. Paul, don't you have some sort of limit? Like now that you're, maybe among those more
Yeah.
senior saints,
Right.
do you limit yourself to one body part?
That's right.
prayer?
That's right.
So-
I mean, Kim really enjoys praying for our body parts. So there is something out there that's not working, in the morning or whatever. And she's just sweet. She kind of leans down and types into her computer the body part. Unfortunately, on her speech computer, it has a body part section. So you'll see her page through the body part. So she finds the right one.
That might be part of shaping the imagination for prayer is all of our speech computers kind of go to a different location.
Right.
Adam, I think to what you're saying, I think there is a tendency in a prayer meeting. I remember substitute teaching at a Christian school many years ago. And, in the lesson plan, it was like, okay, this Bible class, we start by taking prayer requests. And so, but typically it was for, the soccer match tonight and the basketball game this Friday. And there was sort of a certain genre that felt like it was sort of safe and within the context of the group, it was their favorite genre of relatively safe, maybe not all that. To your point about personal involvement, Aunt Edna's hip, especially since I'm not Edna, like there might be a limited personal connection to me to her hip, though I might love her a lot, like it doesn't. So there's sometimes people get into ruts, I guess, about what's the thing you pray for with people.
Right.
Mandy's a first grade teacher, and so she'll do prayer requests, and it's amazing how us adults are a lot like first graders, like get in the ruts are kind of the same theme. And so one will pray for their dog, and so all of them have some request about their dogs, because even if they don't even have a dog, they're like, pray for my dog. And so 100%. Follow the crowd like that.
That's really
that is
sweet.
true. It's important, I guess, in there, like sometimes it is helpful to think about who might start the sharing, because there is sort of a way groups function that way, right? They tend to follow the leader in a certain way.
Yeah.
And Adam, you've developed a really helpful acronym to be able to take care of another problem with praying, which is people praying too long. I think our listeners would love to hear that.
Yeah. So that's the second part of that. But we use the ABBA acronym. Usually read Galatians before that, and then just take the ABBA, but the attentive to one another, the be brief, which is vital to a prayer meeting, and especially it helps with the attentive to one another. And then the third is the be childlike, and the last is attentive to the Spirit. Well, one thing, Paul, that you've encouraged it's just been so helpful for me is people reflecting on prayer time. And so it's really fun when we've just kind of given those guidelines to some prayer meetings, and it's new for people. And so they're learning what it means, like that first piece, to be attentive to one another, for that to be like a conversation, to really even just kind of camp out on something. And so maybe 3 or 4 people are praying for the same person who shared something hard, just a different angle of it, or a spouse in the midst of it, or just how it's affecting them. And so it's fun for people to realize, like they start listening to one another more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes in a prayer meeting, it can feel like you're all supposed to be just going vertical, just in the same room, like kind of like side by side play, right? Like I'm talking to God, then you're talking. But to say, there's also a way where we are meant to listen to each other, and yes and amen, and pick back up the threads, or expand upon one another's prayer. It opens up a different field of play what you're doing.
Right. So they're listening to one another before prayer, and they're listening to one another during prayer. Mm-hmm. So you're bringing love and prayer together.
Yeah.
And then your B, Adam?
So the be brief is vital. And I always give the extra warning when there's pastors in the room, because we tend to struggle with that and get a little too pastoral in our prayers. But even that, when I ask, what did you observe? Just praying brief. And so, and I encourage, pray more than once. But your prayer might just be God, give them wisdom right now, or help them to, help them in that interview. That might be the simple part of the prayer. But everybody reflects on the attentive to one another and brief together that there's I ask it this way. It's like when we're not brief, usually what happens, and somebody beats me to the confession, like most people kind of zone out of long prayers. I mean, like they just genuinely, and I'm pretty quick to zone out. If somebody's praying too long, like I'm kind of just get lost and like I'm thinking of other things, and I hate that, but like it's really easy to do, and so people confess that pretty quickly, and how the gift of brevity just helps them to hear.
Yes. That's one of my favorite prayer meeting stories. And since John Horry's not here to tell it, I'll tell on him. I know that when he was a pastor in California, he eventually created his own guidelines for prayer meetings, which were grace, short, and loud. But the short one was particularly inspired by one prayer meeting he led where there was a dear elderly lady who wound up praying for 15 minutes. And he knew it was a full 15 minutes because he had decided to time it as it got moving along. But yeah, like if you're in a group of people praying for, half hour, 45, even an hour, 15 minutes is a very solid block to occupy. Pretty much everyone else, their brain waves are going to start to flatten during that time.
That's great. Did you have more you want to expand on that, Adam?
Well, I'm debating on if I should say this or not, but I'm going to anyway. So I'm going to beat John's 15 minutes. So maybe we need to have like an award or something. I was in a prayer meeting. I wasn't leading, and it was a wonderful prayer meeting that's been going on for years. That's just a beautiful prayer meeting. But I got paired with a certain guy, and they just paired us up in twos. And I didn't time it. I just knew. I looked later at the time when he prayed about 32 minutes.
Whoa.
And I finally, even in that, like I had to I interrupted his prayer. I felt bad, but I was wanting in there too. And it was really, yes, it was hard. It was hard for me, but I loved his heart and he really meant all of it, but it just was hard to engage together. So,
there's this, as long as we're on this hobby horse, Billy Graham has this story where he had a pastor for one of his crusades praying too long, and he saw people leaving in the aisle. So he took the mic from the guy and said, "While our brother is finishing his report to God, let's sing some hymn." Which is great.
That's great.
Oh, that's funny. That is funny.
So the next piece is after attentive to one another, be brief, and then be childlike. And usually, a lot of people have gone through the Praying Life seminar or the cohort, and so that's we don't have to unpack that a lot. But it is interesting in praying out loud together how we can lose that childlike piece. You want it to clean it up all over again, and so I've even tried to talk about modeling. Like the more I've grown in prayer, the more just I kind of mumble, even in groups. Like, God, I really don't know what I'm trying to say, and so it's just okay just to not have it all cleaned up and just pray in your heart. And so that the authenticity of that, the intimacy of that, inviting one another into real things in life, like that changes the prayer meeting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It makes me think a little bit too about a thread from APL work, as well as like asking God questions, right? Like I feel like children don't feel the burden of having the answer. I think I have prayed with some people who their request to God felt like a full business proposal, like a PowerPoint presentation of what God ought to consider doing and why and how, which is certainly how our minds often work. But even like taking those questions, not getting it all polished up that way, but like, what should we do here? Should we move? Like it is brings the conversation to God sooner rather than like get it all figured out and then ask God.
Yeah. It's fun. Even I love when people accidentally pray things. Like they just things come out
That's
especially in a
great.
group that just like, and it's just what's on their heart, and what other people draw out from you. Like even at the retreat, I was in the group there with Jill, Paul, your wife, and she prayed something, and I was like, oh, like I didn't realize how much that impacted. It shaped what I prayed next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
drew out something in me I didn't even know I was feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I'm just thinking children often say things they weren't planning to say, right? Because they're not full of plans, really.
Yeah.
There's a lot of spontaneity.
Yeah. But then the last piece is attentive to the Spirit, and that's fun, giving people permission to have space to pause in between prayer and just follow as He leads. Like one of my favorite moments, I was praying with a group of pastors and a cohort, and one guy just was praying for another guy's marriage. And that ended up, we just spent 15 minutes just praying over our marriages, praying over us leading in our marriages. Like that wasn't the assignment. I didn't give that guidance. Like it's just somebody's heart broke for something that was going on. And we just all dove in there, and all of us, like it just led to some good, and just the Spirit's work in our own hearts for our own marriages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just thinking about attentive to the Spirit, which ties back to the very first one about being attentive to one another, and so there's this sense that I'm coming into I'm kind of walking through a doorway, expecting what surprises may be there. So I'm just trying to think of an analogy. Esther Meek uses that in analogy, a philosopher in a book I'm reading, which is just a great way to think about, you're being invited to a room and the presence and the Spirit is really present. So you don't necessarily have to control everything. And in fact, if you control it too much, then you're going to miss the opportunities that come. Over-controlled, and it's the beauty, because you don't know what's going to emerge. It kind of the equivalent of that is in your own life, being like a child and letting God know what's on your heart, and now doing that in community. And Adam, I often see you do that in prayer meetings. You don't, like, if you hear something significant or that touches your heart, it's very common that you will stop right then and not let it accumulate, or not to just be kind of added to a list that we're praying through. You'll stop and we'll have a prayer time, and sometimes you'll do that 2 or 3 times before we actually break up into small groups. Do you want to comment on that, Adam? Because it's very much being attentive to the Spirit and what's coming up in people's lives.
Yeah. So it's honestly, I still want to say new to me. Like on one of my prayer cards, it's helped me to go from control to curiosity.
That's great. Yeah.
And so it's like, I want to plan the prayer meetings too. Like, and I honestly, and I come in with a very open-handed agenda or plan.
Right.
But yeah, it's just so much more fun. Like I'm thinking of one of our prayer meetings, at seeJesus, and it went a complete different route than what I was thinking. And we just kind of stayed there. And I even said, you want to spend a little bit of time on this, but we just stayed there the rest of the time. And so, and I even said, let's just keep going. And like, the surprise for me is still surprising. Like I keep trying to figure out, how do I try and, be more attentive, or how do I do this better? How do I grow in this? But it's still just always like a new invitation, like I'm surprised by the surprise too. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah. I like how you layered that, and just expanding on your word curiosity. Liz, it's one of Liz and my favorite words, just because it's it's just such a beautiful part of treating someone else as fully human, as valuing their life. It's the follow-up 2 or 3 questions, And I'm sure you guys have seen me do that in prayer meeting. Well, someone will say something. I'm not even leading, and I probably do it too much, but I'm just genuinely curious, and like, and not being psychological, you know what I mean? Not sort of grilling them with questions, but just sort of in this, you're kind of entering into someone's world in a deeper way. I'm sure you guys have seen me do that with people, and stuff comes out that none of us were expecting from people, which makes it fun.
Yep. Which is like that value, I guess, in there. There's a, even when it's in terms of going around a circle and sharing prayer requests, the goodness of both just listening and hearing at face value, and as the Spirit leads, asking follow-up questions, drawing out more of the story, maybe even with Aunt Edna's hip, like, okay, who is Aunt Edna, and how do you, so that there's a little bit more behind it. I also think, Adam, just with attentive to the Spirit and what you're describing, it's like, it's why prayer meetings can't be fully scripted, right? It'd be wrong, like, because God wouldn't need to show up, right? If we had it all, here's the parts everyone's going to say, and then we're done. Like, it misses the heart of it. One metaphor, Paula, we talked about this quite a while back in some podcasts, but we were using the metaphor of, it's like growing a fire, like a campfire, a bonfire, right? The leader has to be sort of sensitive to, when do you need to throw another log on? Is it going, there's something else, right? That fire kind of representing like God's doing something here, and I want to try to be attentive to, what do I need to do to tend it well here? And that's, I guess, maybe a piece of all of this is, I wonder if part of what is interesting or maybe tricky about prayer meetings is, you were talking at the beginning about the tendency maybe for the leader to preach the prayer meeting, right? Just preach the whole prayer meeting. But on the other side is like, just to have no plan, or just a wander in, is like maybe the other polarity. But what I feel like I've heard from you both is like, there's the sense at which you're coaching the prayer meeting a little bit. The leader does need to be engaged. You are aware of something you're trying to shape for that community. Do you want to comment more on that, Paul or Adam?
Yeah, I think even the preparation ahead of time, and I'm not the best at this. This is something I want to grow in, but like in our prayer meetings, for instance, like knowing, there's several people that are really good at knowing what's going on in somebody else's world or ministry a little better, and they kind of seed it, like they prepare for that. They'll hey, Colin, would you share at this next prayer meeting, what you shared with me the other day? And so it's again, it's not just attentiveness in it, but just, God, what are you up to all around? And so that helps begin to shape. And so it's not controlling it, but it's just, seeing what, I'm going to mess up the log fire analogy, but seeing what logs are already,
bring in a starter log.
There you go. Yeah.
That's my way of starting a fire. Not very Girl Scouty, but
but there's something to that, just seeing what God's already up to, and having people share. And then, Paul, back to what you were saying, I'm curious actually. When I see you get excited and ask a curious question, it completely, and either way is not a bad way, but it completely comes across just genuine enthusiasm, and like, I can't tell if you're leading on purpose doing that, or it's just flowing out of you, or sometimes a little bit of both,
Yeah, it is genuinely just me. It gets me into trouble. I get overly passionate about things too, but it's just the Spirit's. I think as our love grows for people, then our curiosity grows. And the other thing related to it is, and I think it'd be good to do a little teaching in prayer meetings. I do think we ought to do more of that, Adam. But remembering the history of people, it's a way of valuing people when you see them again, had the hip surgery, thinking of,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a really important way to value people. And I tend to be weak at that, or, as a leader, hunting for the quiet person and just singling them out. There are some people who are quick to talk and some people that are slow to talk. And so part of my obligation as a leader, and I know that's a weakness in my leading, but it is something that I probably notice it more when someone else is leading, and I'm dying to hear how someone else is doing, because I know they always have fun things going on.
Yep.
And part of that too, Adam, and this has just grown as my loves have grown, is I love seeing the saints in motion. To borrow a football analogy, which I don't know a lot about football, but like it just, there is something I'm so drawn to the beauty of that, and I love to celebrate that hidden beauty in their lives, and then that teaches people to celebrate it too. They're just kind of going through life drudgery, and if I'm enjoying their hidden obedience, it just gives them joy in that.
Yeah.
For sure. Paul, you said something in there too that was on my mind of the noticing answers to prayer. Like, I think one of the best things a group that meets regularly can do is follow up and notice how God's answering. I mean, that's Adam, this is like straight from A Praying Life and the idea of prayer stories. But I just know even my daughters are at a Christian school, and the one in sixth grade in particular, the teacher does a great job of getting prayer requests and them praying regularly. And I was talking to her the other day, encouraging her to get the answers too. And Paul, thinking about something you've talked about, that feeds faith, right? Like, if we want to, and we just are so busy, our brains move on and we don't notice. And I think especially I'm passionate for this for sixth grade kids to be like, yeah, God's real and he's answering, and look at how he's working. So.
Right. In fact, you guys saw me do that this morning at prayer meeting, just interjecting and asking permission to thank God for we're recording on the day of the Gaza peace plan being signed. And it was just good to stop and celebrate as opposed to rushing on. I do think we bring volume and rushing into a prayer meeting as opposed to curiosity. All those things slow it down. Curiosity, remembering the history, drawing people out. So there's this huge exercise of love that we're in leading a prayer meeting, that then they'll learn to love. They'll begin to draw one another out too, which is just lovely when that happens. It's just lovely when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Just this simple, like we talked about, the act of just even remembering something that was heavy on somebody, the follow up. Like, when I was a pastor, and even now, like, I've always put that weight on myself to be the one to pursue. And it's been fun, even just growing in being loved, being pursued. Like on Fridays, I have a 15-minute prayer meeting with a buddy on the phone, and a longtime friend, and we know everybody, all of our stuff, all of our mess, and we just jump in and pray. And he was praying something for me this past week, just a follow up from something that was heavy on my heart, and I just felt loved by my buddy, that he not only remembered specifically, but praying real specifically for that. And so just him, just the way he cared and thought and remembered. It's so simple, but I just felt loved and needed to be loved.
Yeah. And that just, you're mentioning that example, and I talk about it in a Praying Church book, but when you think of praying together, Jesus' example from Matthew 18 is 2 or 3. And so taking those friendships and praying in the middle of them, it's just it can transform a friendship into something much deeper than that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in that, Paul, you're sort of saying, even if you don't lead a prayer meeting, official prayer meeting of your church, like there's probably a lot of gatherings you have that could be prayer meetings if you added prayer to them, right?
That's right.
That's kind of like you don't have to have an official capital P, capital M prayer meeting going on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So one other thing, thinking about official prayer meetings, I'm thinking like, what about a prayer meeting where, the person on your right prays that the church leadership would get rid of the organ, and the person on the left prays that the church leadership would raise a lot of money to repair the organ, right? Sometimes you've got people who are maybe praying for things, and they're coming from different places. How do you lead in a prayer meeting like that?
With the rise of tribalism, and by that I mean people who are in their own own world. It might be a big world, but they are less aware of other worlds. Usually, it makes it awkward. Obviously, if I'm leading the prayer meeting, I will usually talk to the person afterwards. I think who it's just sort of, but that doesn't happen often. People are usually pretty discreet, but I'll kind of quietly deal with that. If it's an open conflict, even then, I tend to proceed cautiously on that. I mean, what Jesus says in Matthew 18 is that whatever you agree on, so you've got two prayers canceling one another out. So there's nothing wrong with just turning that into a joke. If it was the exact example you used, that's such a lighthearted one, potentially.
Maybe,
although,
not for the people, I guess.
But I'm quick to laugh at things like that and say, we got a prayer problem here. Our prayers, we got two prayers that just canceled one another.
You're going to get everyone praying about the organ in various ways.
So I would back up and pray for wisdom and unity.
Yeah.
About what to pray for.
Yeah.
And I think I would stop the praying, and I might even pray that in my prayer. But I don't run into that a lot. Adam and Liz, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of examples. I don't run into that, especially the organ thing. But even getting into there's so much division on so many issues, and so it's interesting. Like, I had a guy come up to me after this last seminar I did, and he asked specifically, with kind of a hot topic right now in our country, like, hey, how do you pray over this? And he was talking personal even. But I could see he was very passionate about his side of what that was. But I could tell even him in his passion, he held that back from the bigger group, which that's hard too, because you want to be able to. That's not for the larger settings sometimes, the individual.
Yeah.
That's a hard one.
I just encourage people who, if there's a group of 2 or 3 people who are, really want a new organ, then just start praying together for it. You know what I mean?
Right. Gather with like-minded folks to the extent that you can.
Yeah. Gather with like-minded folks,
right.
and just, don't wear your prayer meeting on a sleeve, and just, and pray away.
And maybe don't ask the pastor to put that in the bulletin, the new organ prayer meeting.
Pro-organ prayer meeting. Someone else might start an anti-organ prayer meeting. I mean, obviously, politics is a different arena where similar tensions can arise. But I do think, going to prayer when you're kind of like on your knee, there's a humility in what you're asking, and a attunedness to the context that can give wisdom there. But yeah, like you said, Paul, it's also just okay to say, wow, we're coming at it from different directions. We need wisdom. Help us, Father, right?
One way of thinking of this is that you just want to be careful when you bring judgment into prayer. But that is, like, we have this little prayer menu, and that is a set of prayers. You just want to be careful on that. I mean, especially when there are people who might disagree with your prayer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're referencing, Paul, our prayer window that is built sort of from the petitions of the Lord's Prayer. That's another podcast for another time. But just to say, a category where there is bringing judgment into a situation.
And I mean, one last thought is that, although I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, it's just like, Malcolm Gladwell's insight of 10,000 hours, that to get good at something, you need 10,000 hours at it. And prayer is like, it fits into that, that whole category of like a group gets good at praying by praying together a lot under good leadership. And just give yourself time and the group time to do that.
Yeah. Adam, any last thoughts from you?
Yeah, it might seem oversimplified, but I have a prayer card on prayer meetings.
That's great.
Just praying ahead of time for your prayer meetings. And even in mine is, God, do you want me to, pray with this group, or do you want me to start this? So there's some things I've been praying for a while, but just praying for the prayer meeting even ahead of time, which seems like an obvious, but for me, it wasn't for so long.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. All right. Well, thank you guys for talking. We hope this conversation is helpful to you. Hope your prayer meetings sparkle and a lot of your everyday ordinary meetings become prayer meetings. So thanks for listening.